GameBiz 3 is probably the best tycoon game you can find for creating video games. And it's 10 years old, clunky and ugly, and quite frankly, a discouraging example for the entire genre. Looking at this game, you wouldn't be wrong to say that you have no interest in playing it simply because of how ugly it is. And that's fine. That's why games like Game Dev Tycoon, or MAD Games Tycoon, or Game Dev Studio, Game Corp DX, all these other examples, that's why they exist, to be prettier and newer and flashier. Yet, even with all that polish, they still manage to somehow be less. I once spoke about MAD Games Tycoon being one of my favorite game tycoons. I did this in a video that today is unlisted for being just the worst. It's not a great video by any means, but in the comments of that video, I was directed to this little game called GameBiz 3. Yes, it's the most generic title you can ever name a game, but that's fine. I reached out to the developer and I said, hey, can I get a key? And you know what? He sent it to me. So now I have it and I've played it for a few months and it's really, 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 really good. It's disgusting how good this game is. So I suppose this is my disclaimer. I received this game free from the developer, but I didn't promise to make a video about it, and it's been like 9 months since he sent it, so I don't think he's eagerly awaiting my opinions. Pretty sure it still falls within the guidelines of not a shill to talk about it. Now, that being said, I just know you'll let me know in the comments if you think I am a shill. I'm so positive that you'll just lay out exactly how wrong I am. Anyways, so the game is really good. And I think about it and I say, man, this game should be on Steam and it should be selling like hotcakes. And it should totally have a new update in the last decade. But it doesn't. And so I started to wonder a bit about the profitability of these games. For some of you, you may not remember, but I actually started this channel, Cry More, because, well, CSGO Overwatch montages, you know, before Blizzard's Overwatch came out and destroyed that search term. But then I started doing critiques of video games, mostly indie games, and got sent a whole boatload of games. One of those was Computer Tycoon, which I also really enjoyed. I super enjoy tycoon games overall. I like management simulators. I love the ability to really dig in and create something. I remember distinctly that the creator of this game, whose name is Andres, mentioned that he saw so little revenue from his game being sold that he simply had to stop working on it. I know eventually he did go back to working on it, but I'm pretty sure it became nothing more than a side hobby. So maybe the hunger for this type of game isn't as pervasive as I would imagine, you know, based on my own interests. Plus, I look at that game today and I look at the way it was delivered and I see how they are essentially not the same game anymore. Each update talks deeply about how Illis is responding to some comments about the game, some complaints, and knowing how incredibly kind he was to me and my complaints about the game when I covered it, I can't help but think that perhaps this genre might also pull in people who are naturally predisposed to being ungrateful. God knows it's hard enough making a game, let alone delivering it to a silent majority represented by the overly vocal minority whose sole communication with the developer consists of, "You're bad." So maybe on top of the game genre being not as profitable, perhaps the audience just kind of sucks. And you know, I can see why we do suck. I get it. We're not grateful for anything. I super understand, being that I am a very critical game player. I'm pretty fast to point out the bad. In fact, this is a digression, but I've been watching Lost in Space on Netflix. No spoilers. I'd never seen it, but I wanted to. It looked neat, and I have some vague memory of the bad movie that came out in the 90s or something, and I think I've seen an episode of the show from the 60s maybe, so I felt really interested in watching this show, and the entire first season so far has been me yelling at the TV about how none of it makes any sense! Where are these places geologically located? There's a glacier next to a desert, next to a forest that's dry enough to catch on fire, but still close enough that you could drive there pretty easily. And why is every single issue so contrived? The only reason these problems ever pop up is because they did something themselves to cause it every single time. And let's seriously talk for a minute about how the Dr. Smith character's entire motivation is stupid, very stupid, and somehow relies on some Joker-esque super mastermind, super plan. And this is how I react to every single episode. By the way, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell if you're super into random interjections in the middle of the video game videos. If you lost the thread of this, the point was, I'm super critical and fast to point out the bad, so I get why a developer wouldn't want to deal with an audience like me. Yet, still, I see so many of these simulators, so someone has to be making money from them, and there has to be an audience, or no one would produce the games in the first place, or so I would think. However, this kind of game, the kind of game that GameBiz 3 is, well, it's not really very well represented, even in the management subcategory of Steam. Instead, you get a lot of arcadey tycoons or the really big, super expensive megaliths in the category, games like Cities Skyline. Now, I don't think Cities really fits as a competitor, but it's technically a management simulator, so shruggy emoji. The end result being that the few games tend to be either Stardew clones or Game Dev Tycoon clones, which itself is a clone of Game Dev's story, and it's easy to see why. These games are very successful. They've sold millions of copies, and the copies of them sell millions of copies. So they ended up wiping away the more tactical simulators. MAD Games Tycoon probably sold over 100,000 copies, but it took 4 years and its sequel sold less than 20% of that. In fact, all of these games I mentioned before tended to sell okay, but not great, and it definitely took years. Plus a lot of sale prices. I think you could buy all of them for a grand total of about $10 during the last Steam sale. And that's not a lot of profit. Certainly not enough for you to survive on for the many years these developers tend to need to create a new game. Another slight digression here. One of the more interesting management games that I've played in a long time is Station Flow. And another disclaimer here, the game was sent to me a while ago, so I did receive it for free, but it has this sort of flow. It has a station flow to it that is really meditative and intuitive and generally just really good. But of course, it's also much more stylistic and basic, so you don't really tycoon things so much as you efficiency things. If you look at a base and satisfactory and say, okay, but what if we made this conveyor belt a level 3? It will match up with those level 2s in the combiner at a perfect time to avoid any shortages 3 bases over, then Station Flow is for you. Okay, now I promise I'm trying to stay focused. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's only one more digression in the near future, and it's totally worth it. GameBiz 3 has been out for a decade, and it was never on Steam and never really got any massive promotion, so I have to assume that it probably didn't make very much money at all. More of a case of a carpenter selling the rocking chairs he made in order to fund the materials cost to build himself a really good rocking chair, instead of a major commercial enterprise. It sold well enough that people know about it, so that's a thing, but it's very niche, and in a subculture like this, there's not a whole lot of alternatives if you're looking for an in-depth, serious, game designing, making, producing tycoon simulator. Being in the top 20 just means you exist. I find it sort of sad that these games don't have a wider base, that they don't sell as well as they should. I know that it's the nature of the business that the biggest fish gets the most attention. They get all the mods and the DLC packs and the sequels sell well and they get big deals from the big publishers. But it still makes me a little salty when a game like GameBiz 3 isn't even known about. It just doesn't have any attention. And now that it's 10 years old, it's probably never going to get attention. And judging by the sales of the other games that have taken the idea and ran with it a bit, there's not much reason for a GameBiz 4. It wouldn't sell well enough to justify the costs of development. So, final digression, a quick detour, is a game called Cartel Tycoon. This is something I'm really excited for because it takes a bit from all of these things and kind of mushes it together with hero units and a little bit of Netflix. I'm super interested in seeing what it does. I played the demo, and it's pretty rare that I'll finish a demo and then go play the demo again, but I did, and I might do it again. It really hits the spot for me, even though the complexity it has is a completely different kind of complexity from GameBiz 3. Interested in seeing a video about something else, something intriguing? Click one of them in front of you now. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.